Yeah, I know. I would still really need to get that music so that it fades out much nicer than that, but that's just going to take time that I don't have right now. But we're live. Hello. Thanks everybody for joining me. And today we're going to have a play with the application that we've been building the last month in the last two streams. We managed to get Windows authentication working last time, which was really cool. Today, we're going to try and get Android authentication working. I've been looking into it over the last week, and that's kind of been okay. And then we're going to do a little bit of cleanup, one, to try and get it organized way better than it was. And two, I think we need to rename it because it's, Blazor test whatever. And I think if we can, since I have an idea now for what I want to do with it, we can rename it and start to make it a little bit better. So before we get into that, who do we have in the chat room? Hello there, Jessica. Thanks for joining us. And I'm guessing that your Wi-Fi's okay at the moment. Then we're going to keep our fingers crossed for you. Having a dodgy network is a nightmare. It happened to us last Friday. We got up in the morning and all of a sudden we could only access half the amount of websites that we should be able to access. And the cable modem's been doing this to us for an age. So I knew what I had to do, but it was just work. It's something to do with IPv4. I don't know why, but about every 3 months, our cable modem forgets how IPv4 works. And the only thing I can do to fix it is a factory reset, which makes life a little bit interesting because, until that point, you don't have anything working. It's really weird. When it first happened, we were without internet for about 2 days because half the sites worked, half the sites didn't. Our cable provider had no clue what was going on. All they could see is that it should be working, your connection should be stable, and it should be working. And the connection was stable. It just had absolutely no V4. So now I know what to do, and it only takes an hour or so to fix, whereas before it took a weekend. And thankfully, the last time I went traveling, I got myself a travel router, and I've forgotten the name and the brand of it, but I'll get it for the next stream because it's a really cool piece of kit. And I got it so that I could join hotel Wi-Fi and everything like that safely, and just have all my devices connect to my travel router. My travel router goes into a VPN. I don't have to connect to hotel Wi-Fi for everything that I own, just that one device. And I'm actually finding that I'm now using it at home. When the cable modem decides to die, I'm connecting the travel router to my phone, and the routers in the house then connect to my travel router, or the access points in the house then connect to my travel router. All good fun. You're in the late 90s. Is that as in it's up, down, no speed, sudden speed? I remember my internet in the late 90s and it wasn't fun. Although, to be fair, it was all I knew. A 56 baud modem, and that was kind of it. Something like that. Good luck. Before we get started, I have to thank Omniplan again because they pay for my StreamYard license for me, which is very kind of them. Omniplan, based in Amsterdam. It's who I work for. I'm Tech Explorer DevOps at Omniplan, and we make financial advice software. And we've just launched a new API service, our personal finance hub, and hopefully I'm going to get to make some videos on that in the short term, which I'll be doing under Omniplan. No idea how I'm going to be doing that yet, but that's something that we're going to be looking at in the coming months or so. Right, with that out of the way, shall we go to our screen and see whether or not things are actually working? So, now last time, I was sharing my desktop from my new gaming monitor, and apparently Windows HDR really messed that up, so it was really difficult to see on the stream. Can I just ask, it looks fine on my side this time. It no longer looks like it's got a gray overlay. Is this readable for people, or is this still looking really dark? I've changed to a different monitor today so that I can switch back and forth as I need to. Hopefully, it's legible. Right, we are in Windows. I want to do in Windows. In Visual Studio, yeah, it's brain fog central today, unfortunately. Woohoo! Not dirty milk today. That is good news. That means that I can actually now stream as I want to, as opposed to what on earth is going on. Um, I want to catch up where we were last week. So like I say, we managed to get our authentication working. So let's just run this and check where we are. And of course, it opens up on the wrong screen because it always opens up on the wrong screen. So this is our app. I'm not going to try going to any of these because I broke them deliberately. They've not got the API running in the background. But we should be able to log in. And when we click on this login button, nothing happens. That's interesting. There we go. You can't see it because it's on a different screen. But we can now come over to Auth0. We can sign in with Google. We can open Blazor Test Maui. Let's get rid of that screen. And hello, Stacey Cashmore. So we can log in. And then we can log out again. And that all works as we expect. So that's where we got to. That was interesting to set up. There's so many tutorials on this, but most of the ones that are found kind of miss the important bits of what you need to set up in the app XML and the app manifest in order to get this working. That took an amount of searching. So before we go any further, we're just going to check what we didn't check in last time. Bad Stacy, I should have checked this in and gone with it. And something that I always try and do is always make sure that I check what I'm checking in before I push it. And the reason why I do this is because I love to do pair programming so much. And if I do pair programming, then I like to do my code reviews on the fly as I go. But if you're going to do that, you always need to make sure that you know what you're checking in so that nothing bad happens. So it's just kind of a routine that I've got myself in. Okay, that all looks good. So let's close all of this and get that checked in. Added Windows authentication. You know what? That looks odd, doesn't it? Added Auth0 authentication for Win app. That's better. So let's commit all of those. I'm really pleased I remembered to do that here. I made a huge mistake yesterday. It was my last day of work. I've got a couple of weeks vacation now during the school holidays. I'm working on a Playwright application for the office to try and move away from Cypress, where our E2E tests are at the moment. And I got it working. I needed to make a change to go a little bit further in our process. And I forgot to do the check-in in between, and I broke something, and I do not know what. Rather than just undoing the changes I did, I had to trace everything through and figure out what I'd done before I could move forward. So let that be a warning. Always check in and always make sure your ears are pointing in the right direction. Okay, so that is our Windows authentication. Now we're going to work on Android. And this is actually not too particularly evil. First thing that we need to do is change our Android manifest XML, and we're going to do that in the XML editor. And I need to add a query in here. Now, I am not an Android developer, and I need to look at this further to figure out exactly what's going on, but this is just what we need to make it work. It's like, make it work first and try and figure out and understand it after. We need to add a custom tab service in order to make our authentication work. And from what I can see, quickly looking at it, what the custom tab service does is allows you to have an Android browser inside of your application. And that's really important for Auth0 because we log in via a web command. So that's the first thing that we need to add, this custom tab service. And the second one that we need to add is a web authentication callback activity. So that needs to come into our Android app and web authentication callback activity.cs. And what this needs to do, I'm going to copy paste the code because this is what I really need to look into to understand it. I've been playing with this kind of all week, hoping that I can get something working, and I got it working at the weekend, so we can move it here. We need to add a web authenticator callback activity. You know, if you're going to copy code, it really helps if you copy everything, doesn't it? As you can see, I've been playing with this in the office as well. So let's change this to the right namespace, shall we? Right, there we go. That's what we wanted. So in order to add this browser, we need to set some information on the activity. So I think most of these are kind of understandable by themselves. We don't want any history in this browser. We just want to use it for the login and then to get rid of it. We are going to launch it in a single top, which really doesn't say much when you do the hover over, but I'm guessing that just gives you a single tab in a browser which covers the application. So you need to go through this in order to continue, and I've got no idea what the exported is. Oh, whether or not the activity can be launched by other components, and that makes sense when we're trying to do a login action inside of our browser. I must admit, when I was doing this, I was actually expecting it to launch inside of a Chrome tab, but it doesn't do that. Actually, it really does everything inside the application. It's a little bit neater actually than doing it inside of the Windows app. Okay, so then we have our callback scheme, my app. That's the same as we used. We are going to be changing that today, I think, because I think if I understand this correctly, it's always a good way to check whether or not you've understood it correctly. But if I understand it correctly, this is how it's going to talk to Windows. And we don't want everything operating under the My App. We actually want this to have a proper name so that we can use it correctly. Now, if I remember correctly, and that's a big if, this is all that we should need to do in order to get this working. So while that's building, let's have a look at how we're going to be testing this. I have here an Android emulator. And as you can see from the top, I'm running this as a Pixel Pro 7. This is just running on the emulator that's inside, that comes with Visual Studio. You need to enable hardware virtualization in order to get this running well. It will run without it. And on my works machine, it was not happy because it needed some settings that don't come out of the box on that particular machine. Forgotten what they were from the top of my head. I don't have the machine to look at, unfortunately, but with the error that it gave me, it's really easy to find the solution by doing some Googling. But this generally works quite well. So, you know, we can open up a browser here, and it just works like a phone. So if we search for the Guardian, then, you know, we can go browsing on the web and everything else, and woohoo. And you can close things. It's really hard to actually close it. There we go. We'll just clear all using the mouse because I don't have a touchscreen here. But hopefully, when we hit this play button now, and we say go to the Pixel 7 Pro, I'm hoping it's going to work. And otherwise, I'm going to turn off my microphone. I'm going to swear. And then we're going to have a look into it and see why it doesn't work. And I'm going to check again on my works machine why it does work and see whether or not we can get it going. Now, this can take a few minutes to deploy. When you're doing this, always make sure that you've got your emulator running before you start, because that just makes things go a little bit quicker. Waiting for the emulator to start can take some time. Here we have our app. Now we can go to our counter page, and we can see this is the same as we have in our web version. This is the same as we have in our Windows version. It's just the same type of thing. Now, when we go to login, we can see that that browser opens up inside of our app. Now, I'm not going to log on with Google here because I'm not logged in with Google on this phone, and then you have to go through all of the fun of multi-factor authentication. What I am going to do is take this out of the screen so you don't see my password. And hopefully we'll get it back across in a second. What was my password again? Nope, it wasn't that. So then we can come back in here and we have our authentication working. It knows who I am. It's got that information from Auth0. We can log back out again. And there is our app. Once I found out how to do this, I was shocked at how easy it is to actually get authentication working in the Android phone. Now we still have some steps left here. Is that for trying to guess my password, or is that because I said my password out loud when I didn't mean to? Thankfully, it's a test password. It doesn't really matter, but I'd still rather not say it out loud. Okay, let's go back to our application. Let's stop this and see what we have left to do. All of the above. Yeah, I can well believe that. I really can well believe that. Let's get our changes again checked into Git before we break something. So added auth0 for Android app. Commit all. And then we only have a couple of things left. See, we have these two. We have iOS and we have Mac Catalyst. I desperately want to get these working. I am not going to be doing it yet. And the reason for that is it's just a royal pain in the butt. It really is. I have a MacBook Pro. I used that when I wrote my book to check that my code also compiled and worked on a Mac before it went out there. However, developing for it from a Windows machine is a nightmare. In theory, you should be able to just simply pass this over without a problem directly from your Windows machine. So if we go to our debug, is it debug or is it elsewhere? This one. We have our iOS local devices, we have our remote devices, and we have our simulators. To get all of those working, you need your Mac to do something as well. I've followed the instructions repeatedly. My Mac absolutely 100% refuses to play ball with me. I don't know why. I'm not particularly interested in resetting my Mac to factory to see whether or not that solves the problem. It does have a couple of other issues that would probably benefit from resetting it back to 0. But yes. So I want to get this working. We might come back to it at some point in the future, maybe. But I'm not going to be doing that just yet. We'll do that later on. What we're going to do today instead is do some cleanup. And, before we do the cleanup, I want to show you how we're going to be doing this in the web application because that's one we can still add authentication for. And I'm going to use that using a project that I've already written several times. I use it also in my book and in my presentations that I give at conferences. But that's, excuse me, this is a little bit spur of the moment. So this is not organized in any way, shape, or form, but we can get this going. Let me just get my code here. So what I have, I don't have it here. Of course I don't have it here. Why would I possibly have it ready to run? How are we going to do this? Where do I have this functionality that I'm not going to have to rewrite it on the fly? Let's have a look at what I've got on GitHub, shall we? Let's just bring that over here, get rid of that. So here's my GitHub. Do I have it here? This is from my static. Yes, this is what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get this locally, and I'm going to copy this static web authentication project so that I can use it inside of this application as well. This, by the way, is, as it says, it's the backup for my enterprise static web app talk, where I talk about getting the workflow working correctly. We're going to come back to this because at some point, I want to deploy this so that it actually works. We're running it as a static web app, so I need to get this one working as well. Let's just copy that. This that you're looking at as well, by the way, Windows Power Toys, awesome set of tools. Can't recommend using them enough. And it means that if you do Alt Space, you get a Spotlight type search inside of Windows so that you can open up different applications. It's not quite as good as Spotlight, but it works well enough. So let's come here. Why are you opening in that PowerShell? This is weird. That should look a lot cooler than that. I'm going to have to look into that after the stream. Maybe I've not set up my terminal yet. CD, this is GitHub, isn't it? And then we want git clone. And then we want to open up our file explorer. So inside of our enterprise backup, we want to copy this one. And then we want... Once I've got this one named properly, by the way, I am going to push it to GitHub as a public application. Let's paste that one there. So now, hopefully we can add an existing project here. Check that it doesn't need anything before it builds and take a quick swig of water because I've not drank enough salt water today. Sounds a lot grosser than it actually is, by the way. It's not too bad. So what do we have here? What I've got here is a number of things that we need in order to be able to authenticate inside of Blazor, inside of a static web app. So we start with our models, and our models, we have an authentication data. I'm going to show you what this is in just a second, but we have our models authentication data. It's what you get back from static web apps when you ask about the currently authenticated user. That contains a client principal, which has your identity provider, your user ID, user details, roles, claims, access tokens, etc., etc. And a static web app claim is just a type value key value combination type record in order to get the information out. So that's the models that we need to do in order to access Azure Static Web Apps. And then what we're going to have is an authentication state provider that we're going to pass in a HTTP client. And this is going to get a client principal from that static web app, and it's going to convert it into a claims principal so that we can create a new authentication state to use inside of our Blazor application. If anything goes wrong, then we're just going to return a new authentication state with a new claims principal. As we saw with the Maui application, that just means that you're not logged in. And then to get the client principal, we go to an endpoint in the static web app itself, .auth/me. And this uses, it's not completely easy auth from Azure, but it's based on easy auth. So it allows us to get information about that user. We just go to an endpoint because we are sending the correct authentication tokens when we make the request, so we can trust the data that we get back. And to turn that from a client principal into a claims principal, what we do is strip out the anonymous role, because all users get anonymous, whether they're logged in or not. And if a user has no roles left after you strip that out, it means they're not logged in. Because by default, anybody who logs in gets two roles. They get authenticated and they get anonymous. So if you've got nothing left after stripping anonymous, they're not authenticated. And then we just return that new claims principal yet again, they're not logged in. If we do have roles left, then we make a new claims identity based on the identity provider that we get back from the static web app, the name from, or the user ID from the static web app, which we give to the name identifier, user details that we give to name, and then each of the roles that we have back from the static web app, we put into this claims principal, and that's how we're going to make our application. On top of that, we also have this authentication extensions, because there's two things we need to do in order to make authentication work inside of our static web app Blazor application. We need authorization core. And I got an idea that this is possibly out of date, and I'm going to have to change that at some point. And we need to add an authentication state provider. That would be what we just looked at. So when you ask for an authentication state provider, get a static web app authentication state provider. So we have this inside of our project. We are going to go into our Blazor client, and we're going to reference that. So we want to add that one. And then in our program, we're going to need builder.services. What did I call it? That one. And that's not going to like that. If we do control dot, oh, that's not right. Why are you not working? We have our project reference. We're passing in the services collection, so I've got it in the right place. Use the right word, Stacy. There we go. Okay, it just got confused and couldn't find the using that I was looking for. Of course. Now that we have our authentication, there's a couple of things we need to do in Blazor in order to make this work. One is inside of our app.razor. I believe in the new version of .NET, this is roots.razor, but for now it's still inside of the app. And we need to add a cascading authentication state. We're going to get rid of that one for now. What did I do? I'm pressing the wrong thing somewhere. I'm not able to type today. Seriously, the brain fog is strong today. Cask. You know what? I'm just going to leave that for now. Okay, I know what's going wrong. What's going wrong is Copilot is not doing what it should do. It does this occasionally. It's awesome when it works, and it's a pain in the butt when it doesn't. And inside of our endpoint, we're going to add our @using statement. And now when we're going here, this should now work. So let's give that a quick compile, make sure it works. Okay, that's good. And now on my layout, I want an authorized view. Okay, and here I want an is it context dot user dot identity dot name. So if I'm authorized, show me my name. And if I'm not authorized, show me not logged in. So that's all we're going to add for now to make this work. And then if we go back to, I don't want my client, I want my multiple startups. Client and API. I want both of those to start. Okay. And then we can actually see this in real life. So we have our API running. We should have somewhere our front end running, not that one, but this one that you can't see because, of course, it's on the opposite screen. And then we have our app, which I'm going to bring over as well. And you can see we're not logged in. For some reason, where's that going to? Oh, that's very cool. It's completely the wrong place, but I'm guessing Copilot thought, oh, you want to log in when you see this. We'll fix that one in a second. So in order to run this as a static web app, we're going to need to come into our terminal here, and we're going to have to start it. Oh, come on. Why do I have to be pixel perfect to resize a PowerShell window? Okay, and we want to come into the... Yeah, we can run it from here. Is that what it remembered from last time? That's what it remembered from last time. So we're going to run our application now as our static web app running locally. Now, it gives us a nice warning here again. This emulator may not match your cloud environment exactly. Always deploy and test your app first in Azure. Good advice. Always make sure you do that. There are some differences. So inside of here now, if we go to localhost 4280, we have our app. We're still not logged in. The way that static web app easy auth works, like I say, we have that /.auth /me. And there's our client principal. This is how we get that client principal out of an Azure static web app. Now, as well as that, they also have login functionality. Auth login, and say we want to log in with GitHub, GitHub. We just have this URL, .auth/login/GitHub. This will allow us to log in using our GitHub authentication. This comes out of the box with static web apps. But locally, we don't have all of this set up. This only works because Microsoft's done the work within static web apps to make this work. So what happens when you're running locally, I think this is kind of cool, is it just goes round and round and round and round and round, and I'm going to get a 404 in a second. Why am I getting a 404? I'm getting a 404 because the static web app is case sensitive on the URLs. We have this page. This allows us to pretend to be logged in. So right now it's going to pretend that we're from GitHub. We're going to give ourselves a username, GitHub user. We can say the roles that we want and the claims that this user should have. And this is going to allow us to test our application against a certain security configuration. Now, this is both awesome and a little scary, because if your environments are set up wrong, you can authenticate users inside of your app and give them access to things they absolutely should not have. So great for testing, but don't do it outside of that. Now, what we're going to do here is just give ourselves a couple of extra wells. So actually, Stacy, admin, live right now. Line right now, live right now. If we now log in, you can see I've got my name, GitHub user. My authentication is working inside of my application. And if I go to that auth me endpoint, we can see that we now have this client principal. I have a user ID, which was something else I could set in that application. We can see that I'm anonymous, authenticated, actually Stacy, admin, and I'm live right now. I don't have any claims. The identity provider is GitHub, and the user details are GitHub user. So that's how we're going to handle authentication inside of our app. Now, let's log out a second. We're going to put all of this into links at some point. Because I'm not using GitHub, I'm going to be using Auth0, and that means I'm going to have to deploy this as a standard tier static web app so that I can use custom authentication and talk to Auth0. But before I deploy it, how do I change that? Well, we want .auth/login/auth0. And we just get the same page. So it doesn't matter what authentication you are using, you can make it work from here. I really love this functionality here. Right, but we now have authentication working inside of our website, inside of our Android app, and inside of our Windows app. So let's do another commit. Let's close all of this. We don't need static web app running in the background anymore. Move that over to the other window. And let's add these changes. So add SWA authentication for web app. Fun one is the application that we're using has no idea that we're using Auth0 for authentication here. The app doesn't care. It's only in the configuration that we're going to have to set that. So how are we doing? We've got about 20 minutes left. So we do some cleanup. The first one that I want to do is make my login screen shared. So we tried to do that last week and it all went horribly wrong because I didn't think it through properly. But what I want to do is change. Where's my login screen? Did I change mine? Ah, that's my test client. That would explain it. Or not. Where is Maui login? And why doesn't this know about Maui login? There it is. So what I want to do is use this one inside of our shared application. And rather than passing in an authentication state provider into here and checking what it is, I'm going to do that using an interface, and I'm going to add it to the dependency injection. So first of all, we're going to make that interface. I'm going to add that in the models folder because why not? So if we do a Shift F2 and I want authentication slash login provider, that sound reasonable? No, because it's an iLogin provider, isn't it? Yep. Let's change this one to be namespace scoped and get rid of all of this. And that needs to change to interface. And our login provider is just going to have these two things. Now, I don't actually want a login result. It just needs to be a task on both sides. It doesn't need the username password. This is going to be really simple stuff. So that is our interface. And then when we go to here, okay, do we not have, we don't. Okay, we're going to add a reference to the models. I don't know why my Visual Studio is not picking up namespaces. That's fine. We'll add it manually. Oh. That might be why it wasn't picking it up. Let's implement the interface. And we have our log. Oh, we do need to pass an authentication state back. That's kind of unfortunate. I didn't want to have to do that. The reason why I don't want to do this is because we don't use this inside of our web application. In the web application, we only care about being logged in or not being logged in. What do we do with this authentication state? Where's my Maui login? We do nothing with it. Login async, logout async. Okay, we do need it on the local task because that does need to do something, but we don't need it on the main task. And the logout is already just a task. We don't need this because it's already implemented. You happy? You're happy. Okay. Now what I want to do is just check that I've not broken anything. Because checking you've not broken anything is always useful. So let's just run the Maui app. Do we still have our... We still have our phone. Rebuilding the Maui app can take some time, unfortunately, but let's see how it goes. Build succeeded. Let's launch this one, and hopefully that's going to come across fairly soon. Deploying. 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 Oh, come on now. Thank you. See, you just have to yell at your computer, then everything works. So can we still log in? We can still log in. Okay, let's do what we did before and just take it off screen a second. Yay! Okay. That still works. Good. First step done. So the next step then is I want to change this Maui login to not inject an authentication state provider, but to pass in a login provider. Now all of this can go because we don't need to convert it to anything else. This can be an iLogin provider. And then at using, and we need our, that one. So hopefully this should now build. It's not going to run yet because we've not added it to our dependency injection. And because we don't want an explicit provider, we don't need to add it twice. That was my bad. Sorry, Jimmy, I should read your book better, shouldn't I? Now we can add it to our services. So after here, we still need our authentication state provider, but we also need our why don't you like that? because we hadn't had the using statement. So now that we've got that added to our injection, let's check that one still works. And then we're going to we're going to move the login provider somewhere else, and we're actually going to inject that. So build succeeded. Let's push this up to our phone again. Right, I'm not actually going to log in. I'm going to assume if I've got to this page that it's working. Okie dokie. So now we should be able to take this Maui login. Let's rename that to login.razor because it's no longer just a Maui login. We no longer need this Maui security or that auth0 provider. We can get rid of all of that and just have this model's authentication. And you know what? We'll just rename these ones properly while we're at it so that it doesn't complain. La 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 la. Woo! It worked. So inside of our shared, we now can add a new folder. Components. We can add security. And we can cut that and we can paste it here. Okay. And then we just need to update our roots. There we go. Does that now work? Context doesn't exist in current context. Because we need this one. And we need to add authorization. Which Nugget package was that one again? Components authorization. That looks like the right one, doesn't it? So let's Nugget packages, browse, and we want auth. Yeah. We'll accept everything. Wow. That's suddenly very unhappy. Or is that just Windows Visual Studio falling behind? Can always be Visual Studio falling behind. Come on, do something. Wow, 100% CPU usage just to compile this. That's on a decent CPU too. Build succeeded! Woo! Okay, one last check on the Pixel machine, and after that, we're going to get it working on the web client, and then I guess we'll call it a day. Ay, 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 ay. That didn't work, did it? Why did that not work? Because we're still calling that Maui and we should be calling it login. Oh, now I've got to wait for it to compile again. Or do we? Was that quick? Is that going to work? Yay, look at that, we have a login. And it even goes to auth 0. So we're going to assume that that one's working again. Now for one last one. I think I pressed restart instead of stop. So what we're going to do is just add the login to our Blazor test client. Let's add that to our imports, same as the rest. Using Copilot being annoying again. Okay. Now this login's going to expect a service. So we're going to need to add our services / login service. And this is going to be an I login provider. We need to pass in the how do we pass in the navigation manager here? So now we have a navigation manager. Now we can move around our Blazor application. So what we're going to do is go for underscore and we want to navigate to /auth/login/auth0 and why don't you like that? Ah! Yeah, what the hell you'll do. Okay, why don't you like that? What have I done wrong here? That's what I've done wrong there. Okay, that's not what it should be, but I'm not fixing it just yet because my brain is completely melted. We'll fix that later. But in main layout, at least we should now have our login. We have our login down here, which takes our login service. So we now just need to add our login service. I can't type, apparently. That's better. So now, if we run this, we're going to run the client here. We're not going to do the full static web app thing because it's time. We're just going to check that we see the right thing, and if not, we'll come back to it next time. We should at least see a login. And that doesn't work because it's not going to the right place. So we're going to have to check that one next time. It's obviously loading the login razor, but it's not calling this as I expect it to. Probably because it's not awaited because my brain went completely blank. We'll have a look next time, shall we? That's a bit of a downer to end it on, isn't it? I prefer ending it when stuff works and when it doesn't work, but at least it gives us something to come back to next week. On that note, it is absolutely boiling in this studio because it's a glorious day here in the Netherlands today. So I'm going to get out of the studio and kind of get cool again. Thanks so much for joining me. See you next time. Bye bye.